March 17, 2005, it was announced that Joss Whedon would be directing and writing a live-action film adaptation of feminist superhero Wonder Woman, with Warner Brothers and Silver Pictures, the production studio responsible for the Matrix movies. As he was then regarded as an amazing feminist storyteller and feminist storyteller, this was popularly seen as a great thing. In the introduction to his iconic 2006 Equality Now speech, in which he describes his various motivations to writing strong female characters, actress Meryl Streep references his project with loving adoration in her voice.
Joss Whedon, the wonderful man who's about to bring us Wonder Woman.
Everyone was really excited for what would surely be his best work ever. However, updates on the project ceased, and it quietly vanished into the background. Joss would reference it occasionally, but not often. In the commentary for deleted scenes in 2005's Serenity, he commented that it was ironic that a change had to be made based on concerns that a character looked too much like Wonder Woman.
There were more scenes of her teaching, including her teaching girls with bows and arrows. Nobody liked that. They said it looks too much like Wonder Woman. Paused for irony.
He'd make various references to saying that he was occupied rewriting the script. Finally, on February 2nd, 2007, it was reported that because he and Warner Brothers couldn't see eye to eye, the project fell through entirely. According to Joss, this capitalist corporation, responsible for making and profiting off of the movie, refused to let him incorporate anti-capitalist and anti-corporatist themes. And if Joss couldn't have full control over it, he was willing to let the project die. These anti-corporatist themes and various pieces of imagery would later be incorporated into his 2012 film, The Cabin in the Woods, made with Lionsgate. The death of Joss's Wonder Woman film was sad, but, he soon came out with Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog in 2008, and Dollhouse in 2009, and people just forgot about him making Wonder Woman. Then, in 2009, the niche of desire for a Joss vs. Wonder Woman film was filled by an animated direct-to-DVD Wonder Woman movie. Joss had nothing to do with the project, but it did have Firefly's Nathan Fillion providing the voice of Steve Trevor, and it covered similar ground as Joss would have covered, with Steve Trevor discovering Themyscira and introducing Diana to man's world. So Joss fans generally accepted it as a replacement for the movie, with feminist comic writer Gail Simone co-writing with Michael Jelenic and female director Lauren Montgomery. The film had the same sort of feminist clout as Joss's failed project. I'd call it a little cringe-worthy in some parts, but decently feminist. In 2010, concept art of Joss's film was leaked, suggesting 4 different outfits that Diana could wear. Technically, this makes 5 suggested outfits, counting the teaser poster mock-up, but that appears to have been made by Warner Brothers prior to Joss's involvement. Joss not being an artist himself, I think it's probable that these were made under his direction, possibly by Shauna Tripsick, who has worked with him on several shows, including Angel, Firefly, Dr. Horrible, and Dollhouse. The leaked description of the planned outfit most closely resembles the third example, albeit with a leather skirt, that would sit differently than the cloth material depicted here. The double side slit is a consistent element, and would be traditionally sexy. I would call it more conservative than the form-fitting briefs, which were used in 2006 comics and in the animated film, but your mileage may vary. As for who would wear it, Joss compared his version of the Diana character to Angelina Jolie. He also referenced Kobe Smulders as someone that he would want to play Diana, but he did it in a delivery that most people interpreted as a joke. At the time, she was best known for playing a character in the sitcom How I Met Your Mother, which he presumably was watching in support of Allison Hannigan. But then when he was making The Avengers in 2012, he went and casted her for Maria Hill, a badass S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. As the film shares many similarities to the Wonder Woman film, he might have been telling the truth after all. Where's a lasso of truth when you need one? In 2014, an early draft from Joss Whedon's script from August 7th, 2006 was leaked, offering fans a glimpse of the project that could have been. And it was met with a resounding, no one really cared. No one fell in love with it, but no one hated it either. It was badly written, but understandably so, as an early draft to an incomplete project. I downloaded it, read a bit, and decided that the 2009 film fulfilled what Joss was trying to do, so I was just grateful for that. And, like the project itself, the script just kind of faded into the background as people focused their attention on other things.
It is our sacred duty to defend the world.
And it's what I'm going to do.
In 2017, feminist film director Patty Jenkins finally brought Wonder Woman to the silver screen, and it was received with massive appreciation. Everyone loved the film, mainstream audiences and feminists alike. Feminists especially liked the respect that Jenkins brought to the framing, avoiding the shallow, fetishistic shots, wardrobe, and editing common to masculine-focused depictions of the character. This was seen as the definitive feminist Wonder Woman adaptation. This feminist framing was made all the clearer when we saw the depiction of Wonder Woman and the Amazons in Justice League later that year. The film production actually rejected the realistic armor that Jenkins had developed for the movie series, and had unrealistic bikini armor made to replace it. Aside from just being a bad movie, it's very overtly sexist. In theory, it was a Zack Snyder film, but he quit halfway through the project, Joss Whedon took over as director, and it was beset with studio interference from Warner Brothers, making it a general mess. The two directors are polarizing figures, and fans of one tend to blame the other for problems with the film. While the dialogue after a certain point smacks of Joss's humor, he probably didn't have much to say in the overall plot. Shortly after the film's release, he liked a tweet indicating that the film's villain was the worst in any comic book movie, indicating that the movie wasn't really his vision past certain dialogue changes. Though his framing may at times be sexual enough to be worth criticism, and the concept art indicates that he's not above considering skimpy outfits, I don't think that he would make a change from Patty Jenkins' initial design, and that most criticism of the film that accuses either him or Zack Snyder of being an especially sexist influence on the film to be misdirected, when it's probably the studio that should be blamed. I think that Joss has enough sense as a feminist storyteller to not make this kind of blunder if he were allowed full control over the project. Honestly, the armor design for Jenkins' Wonder Woman looks pretty similar to Joss's screenplay description. Years before the film came out, comics fan Josh McMahon made his own mock-up of what Joss's Diana could have looked like, photoshopping a Wonder Woman outfit onto the body of model Amber G, along with Colby Smolder's face. It looks pretty similar to the one that Gal Gadot's rocking in Jenkins' film. However, after Jenkins' film came out, there was a backlash against Joss and his Wonder Woman screenplay. There was a growing contingent of feminists who hated the attention that Joss got as a male feminist when they thought that he was nothing more than a lying man, producing sexist content that happened to use the strong female character archetype. He has made no secret of the fact that he finds these characters sexually attractive.
There is one question that I've been asked almost every time I've been interviewed. So I thought tonight, briefly, I would share with you one question and a few of my responses. So, Joss, I, a reporter, would like to know, why do you always write these strong women characters? I think it's because of my mother, because of my father, because these stories give people strength, because they're hot.
And many feminists dismiss him as a fetishistic misogynist, lying about being a feminist to subvert the movement. There is speculation that Joss admits this in his work, through creating stand-in characters that are punished through the narrative, as if to absolve him of his guilt of not being a real activist.
We're great humanitarians.
This is cutting-edge science in a house full of hot chicks.
It is a common practice for these feminists to go through his work and look for anything that can be used as evidence that Joss is as scummy as they think. His Wonder Woman screenplay was largely dismissed because no one cared, but the fantastic execution of Jenkins's film as a feminist film gave one such antagonistic feminist the incentive to go through his screenplay in search of evidence that he's a secret misogynist. She posted clips on Twitter with her biting commentary, and this went viral. In 2017, years after people forgot about his Wonder Woman project, critical reviews of his screenplay became trendy. Some news outlets mistakenly reporting that it had only been leaked after Jenkins's film came out. When Joss's ex-wife Kai Cole made a statement in August of that year that Joss was an unfaithful husband, a bit of a perv who blames his flaws on patriarchy, not his fault according to him. He was socialized to be an assertive male who feels entitled to getting to have sex with hot women. And that he used his supposedly good relationship with her.
My wife, who is not only smarter and stronger than I am, but occasionally actually taller, too. Also think that I'm really cool to be married to my wife.
As a shield against the characterization of him as not a real feminist, his reputation as a feminist tanked. It is probably unsalvageable at this point, and this resonated with the critical take on his Wonder Woman screenplay. The popular perception is that the critical look at the screenplay by a bunch of impassioned feminists revealed Joss as a misogynist, and Kai Cole's letter proved it. I think that this is a mistake. I think that Joss is selfish and made a lot of feminist efforts specifically to bolster his personal image, but I don't think his take on feminism is invalid. I think he's well educated on second-wave feminist theory because his mother, Lee Stearns, was a radical feminist who raised him to understand feminism and want to promote it. I think that he made an honest effort to promote feminist ideology even as he selfishly pursued his own self-gratification. And his attempts at feminist messages have to be analyzed as second-wave feminist ideas and not as deliberate attempts to subvert feminism by a secret misogynist. An architect can be in it for the glory while providing a real service to a community by designing a building according to their needs. We can discuss the building itself without weighing the soul of the architect. The world isn't divided into noble servants of justice and sinister agents of malice. People can be flawed human beings with problematic ideas and still make honest efforts to make the world a better place. And good people can support these efforts while still being critical of the source. As for his Wonder Woman screenplay, it is a mess. But I think he honestly wrote a feminist story that needs to be analyzed as a feminist story. Wonder Woman is a weird series, with weird origins and many different interpretations over several decades. As much as Wonder Woman is a feminist work, giving the world a classic female superhero, it is also fundamentally sexual and represents past political ideologies that clash with the new. Both Joss and Jenkins tried to navigate that ambiguity in different ways, and their executions are equally legitimate efforts at modern feminist narratives remixing antiquated feminist erotic fiction with plenty of bondage. The idea that Joss wrote a misogynistic attempt to subvert feminism that is revealed in contrast to Jenkins's real feminist effort is deeply flawed. If this early draft had been made into a movie without revision, it would be bad when compared to Jenkins's version and most of the DCEU. Batman vs. Superman is bad enough that Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman would be better than it by default. It's just kind of a bad superhero movie. Not much better than the super crappy Elektra that had just come out the year prior in 2005. However, based on his overall filmography, I have confidence that he could have polished it into a gem if given the opportunity to develop it. It's still possible that it wouldn't have been as good as Jenkins's version, but I think it could have been a good feminist superhero film for its time.
In every issue of Wonder Woman, women are being whipped, spanked, chained, bound, gagged.
William Moulton Marston created Wonder Woman in 1941 as feminist media to communicate first-wave feminist ideology through his perception of human psychology. He was sympathetic to the feminist movement, believed strongly in women's rights, and was also an adulterous experimental psychologist who partook in unethical studies with female students. He was into BDSM, as we would term it now, a switch, acting submissive to his wife Sadie Holloway, and dominant to his extramarital lover Olive Byrne, and sampling bias led him to believe that everyone in the world were as kinky as he, his lovers, and various examined students were. Wonder Woman was born from this stew of kink and feminism, representing a then-popular feminist idea that women should run the world because of their capacity to cooperate, in contrast to masculine tendency toward domination, as was seen with Woodrow Wilson's brazen entry into World War I. Despite the preaching of feminist pacifists, Marston interpreted this ideology as an ideal disciplined lifestyle of kinky behaviors where women's submission is turned into dominance and men's dominance into submission, and he wrote Diana as a symbol of goodly female dominance through which peace can be triumphant over evil dominating masculine figures that promote war. And the character shares characteristics with the three lovers, each of them kinky feminists. It sounds weird, but sometimes life is that bizarre.
I just can't believe all of our time together and we never tried chains.
Bondage looks good on you, B. The outfit's all wrong, but hey.
There's a fair bit of similarity between Marston and Joss. They're both men who strove to bolster the feminist movement through a popular fictional character being a physically strong woman in contradiction of the stereotype who would act as a hero and promote the idea that women in power is good through sex appeal, involving a fair amount of BDSM themes. Wonder Woman has more kink than Buffy, but Buffy and Angel have enough of it that it wouldn't be a big surprise if it were to come out one day that Joss has a red room of pain somewhere in his mansion.
That's right, puppy. Willow's gonna make you bark.
In a 2002 New York Times article, Joss describes two feminist goals with Buffy the Vampire Slayer: to make an iconic female hero, and to make, quote, a world in which adolescent boys would see a girl who takes charge as the sexiest goddamn thing they ever saw. If he could make boys feel attraction to Buffy as a strong woman, he could send the message that it makes sense to have women in power.
When I created Buffy, I wanted to create a female icon, but I also wanted to be very careful to surround her with men who not only had no problem with the idea of a female leader, but were in fact engaged and even attracted to the idea. And I think there is something particular about a female protagonist that allows a man to identify with her, that opens up something that he might, an aspect of himself he might be unable to express, hopes and desires he might be uncomfortable expressing through a male identification figure.
Or, as Marston might put it, Joss uses the submissive female gender role to create empathy and positions that concept as superior through female dominance and securing masculine submission to it.
You know, you got a willing slave.
This uncanny similarity makes Joss seem like a perfect candidate for the role of bringing Marston's vision to the silver screen, if we care about representing that version of Wonder Woman. Marston's efforts with Wonder Woman were legitimately feminist, and the comic inspired readers in its own context, but today is a different world. Unless you wrapped a polished film around it, as with the biopic Professor Marston and the Wonder Women, a film that was, oddly enough, co-produced by Kai Cole, an authentic film portrayal of Marston's Wonder Woman would probably be seen as sexist to the modern viewer. All of the existing film adaptations use a portrayal different from his. Even Justice League. Yes, they have bikini armor, but they don't tie each other up for spanking parties. But Joss might retain too much of Marston's original content to have progressivism that compares to Jenkins's and Montgomery's. The standard modern take on Wonder Woman is of a powerful female superhero with sex appeal associated with dominance, which is used to make her attractive as a role model for girls, in a way comparable to Buffy. What makes Joss's take on Wonder Woman so weird for him is that the first act largely forgoes the Buffy style of female role model plus dominance fantasy to instead focus on Steve Trevor as the POV character, whose heroism frames the narrative, with Diana as his attractive love interest, who was born into privilege and goes through a journey of discovery of the ugliness of the world at large, as the deuteragonist, until transition into the second act positions her as protagonist, still naive and dependent on Steve as a moral compass and guide to the alien man's world. It takes its cues from Shakespeare's The Tempest, with Diana as a Miranda figure, even as it retains superficial aspects of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. For those who don't know their Shakespeare, that would be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, with Diana as Mantis. She's the sheltered daughter of the ruler of a wacky, isolated island, and she overly optimistically seeks to learn about the greater world when she becomes attracted to a foreigner who crash lands on the island. Arguably, this takes the Wonder Woman story to its elemental roots, but it loses some of the added qualities that distinguish Diana as a hero figure of her own story. In 2018, Joss said that after he heard about the backlash, he went back and reread it and determined that it was great as it was, and that people took little pieces out of context when they should have looked at the work as a whole.
Yeah, I don't know which parts people didn't like, but I went and reread the script after I heard there was a backlash. I think it's great. And people say that it's not woke enough. I think they're not looking at the big picture. It's easy to take one phrase out of context. And not that I was the most woke individual who ever lived at that time 10 years ago, but I was in there swinging, and the movie has integrity and the characters have integrity, and I stand by it.
It's kind of bizarre because I think his filmography shows that he is a better writer than what the 2006 draft demonstrates. It's possible that he looked at a different draft than the one that was leaked, or that he just infers what he would have revised. Actually reading the leaked screenplay is a slog. An annoyingly long slog, too. The film could easily have been over 2 hours long. I'll summarize as best as I can, but as a work fundamentally about gender and sex, pretty much every single beat is relevant to feminist analysis. Feminists have already picked the thing apart, and I feel like I should respond to most of the items of controversy, if not all. This means that I'm going to have to break this review into 2 parts. That's the only way that I can reasonably cover the whole plot without making the viewer suffer the same weariness that I myself had when I made myself read it.
Follow the path of misery, of death and destruction, and you will find
Joss Whedon's script. The script retells Diana's origin story of Steve Trevor crashing his airplane on the mysterious island of Themyscira and encountering the super-strong Amazon women who sought sanctuary there after Ares, the toxically masculine god of war, tried to enslave them. Diana rescues Steve from the crash in a basic twist on gender roles, and he is immediately dazzled by the sight of her. She is super hot, even as she looks strange and out of time. A lot of feminists hated this moment. Honestly, I don't mind the way this is described. Diana is just one of those characters that makes sense as someone who is sexually attractive. And I don't think that the description is skeevy. Here's how the script puts it. To say she is beautiful is almost to miss the point. She is elemental, as natural and wild as the luminous flora surrounding. Her dark hair waterfalls to her shoulders in soft arcs and curls. Her body is curvaceous, but taut as a drawn bow. She wears furnished metal bracelets on both wrists, wide and intricately detailed. Her shift is of another era. We would call it ancient Greek. She is barefoot. It's about Steve being struck by her attractiveness, and is as much about her appearance as an Amazon as it is about her body. Even if her bare feet are there to fulfill a foot fetish, as is often speculated to be one of Joss's kinks.
Do you ever wash your clients' feet?
It's my specialty.
Although the animated film gives her bare feet a focus as well, it is no more gratuitous than her being taut as a drawn bow. She's a sexy Amazon with some practicalities of being an Amazon. Consider instead Frank Miller's scene direction and the script for All-Star Batman and Robin. Okay, Jim, I'm shameless. Let's go with an ass shot. Panties detailed, balloons from above. She's walking, restless as always. We can't take our eyes off her, especially since she's got one fine ass. Ew! That is objectifying, and it comes out that way in the comic. Diana is just described as an attractive character, and I'm sure that it would have come out in a tasteful way, like in a Greg Rucka comic. Regardless of Joss's own kinks, his brand of sex appeal is very deliberately not over-the-top sexiness for the sake of sexiness, but instead sexiness as can supplement empathy. He says in the foreword to his 2001 graphic novel Frey, I had one stipulation. No cheesecake. No giant silicone hooters. No standing with her butt out in that bizarrely uncomfortable softcore pone pose that so many artists favor. None of those outfits that casually and constantly reveal portions of a thong. I wanted a real girl with real posture, a slight figure, and most of all, a distinctive face, a person. If there's a problem with Diana being sexy at all, that's just an issue with the character that comes with the territory. When Wonder Woman was made the real-world gender equality ambassador for the United Nations, yes, the fictional character in the real world, there was an outrage that they would honor what many saw as an anti-feminist pinup girl as a feminist figure, and the character was fired a month later. Maybe that's a good point about Wonder Woman, but the issue goes way beyond Joss. Even Jenkins' Wonder Woman is noted as sexy by the men around her, and they fulfill the same roles that Joss saw for the male characters in Buffy by being engaged by and attracted to the strong woman.
I'm both frightened and aroused.
One of the Amazon's superpowers is speaking a primal language that everyone understands, and being able to understand all other languages, so there's no language barrier between them. Thinking that this is some sign of divinity, Steve wonders if he's in heaven, and if she may be an angel.
An angel.
She is likewise shocked that he's a man.
It's a man!
And thinks that Athena, in this version the goddess of wisdom and not war, granted her a miracle. Neither of them makes the connection to the storm that caused him to crash, but the noted fact that no one saw the storm until he was in it hints to us that it's of supernatural origin. Diana may be right.
Yikes, it sounds like you've had an epiphany.
I keep saying that, but nobody's listening.
This is part of a theme about the question of God's existence, as told through the metaphor of Athena. Essentially, Joss borrowed Angel's theological issues to give Diana's character added depth. His Diana and Steve are, more or less, gender-swapped XBs of Angel and Kate from Angel. Diana takes Steve back to the Amazon city, where we meet various attractive Amazons, including Diana's mother, Hippolyta. Joss describes her as middle-aged, but very much in her prime. There has been significant feminist backlash to this description. Like, not even age can allow a woman to be free of his lust-filled male gaze. Honestly, it strikes me as a positive portrayal of female sexuality. When Thor Ragnarok came out in 2017, there was a generally positive feminist reaction to casting the 48-year-old Cate Blanchett as sexy villain Hela, showing that middle age needn't be assumed to keep a woman from being sexy, as is often the case in Hollywood. Being impressed with Hela, I see nothing wrong with the basic concept of sexy middle-aged Hippolyta. Unfortunately for Steve, the Amazons have a rule that men who discover them must be killed. Knowing that Ares is still out there, hunting for some sign of Themyscira, Hippolyta is extremely cautious. She interrogates Steve with a lasso of truth to determine if he is a threat to their discovery. He shows his honor by promising to never tell a soul, unless his family and friends are threatened. Hippolyta knows nothing about how likely this is. She just sees a threat. She says she must kill him for the common good. What is the worth of one man, compared to a few hundred Amazons? Steve counters that the mission he was on when he crashed must be fulfilled for the common good outside of the island. More lives are on the line than the Amazons. In this way, Steve and Diana display positive traits counter to their gender roles. Persuasion versus physical strength. It is a simplistic feminist role reversal, similar to that seen in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer film.
Pike is the damsel in distress in the movie. So we did the big role reversal thing, and Swanson's the hero.
As for his mission, he's interestingly not a soldier, but a charity worker, delivering food and medicine to a refugee camp in Albania. The conflict isn't described, but it's set in the modern day, and deals with a modern issue in a pacifistic way. The original comics depicted Steve as a World War II soldier, recruiting Diana to fight the Nazis, as was the issue of the day, and the 1975 TV series recreated this element as a period piece in its first season. Jenkins's version is also a period piece, notably changing the setting to World War I to make both belligerents unsympathetic, allowing for more commentary on why war itself is bad. The animated film sets it in modern day, but uses the plot device of Steve being involved in a dogfight when he crashes onto the island. Joss's version both sets it in modern day and does away with the whole premise of Steve supporting war so that there can be a greater underlying pacifistic theme. Hippolyta suggests that she kill him and promise to fulfill his mission, and he's ethical enough that he has to agree. Diana argues with her mother, but Hippolyta won't budge out of fear for the safety of her people. I think it's noteworthy that she's portrayed as misguided, but sympathetic. She isn't an angry, man-hating caricature, as very easily could have been done, as with standard Ladyland depictions, like that in Catwomen of the Moon.
We have no use for men.
Before his execution in the morning, Steve gets one night in a lavish bedroom, and Diana visits him. She gives voice to the idea that his arrival represents some kind of sign that Athena sent to her. Steve doesn't like that. He chews her out for treating him as anything less than a person about to die. It makes sense as a drama element, but comes across as unduly harsh. Him just tearing into her. And I can see where it can be criticized as not supporting a feminist empowerment depiction like in Jenkins's film. One interesting thing that Steve calls her out on, though, is her privilege. Steve is a working-class guy, and Diana is a magic princess from a land where poverty doesn't exist. That is a legitimate point. A lot of versions of Diana deserve this criticism, including Jenkins's. Her naive optimism, even when framed as a heroic trait, stems from class privilege. One option to get past it is by making her work for a living. As with the controversial New Wonder Woman, Mike Sekowsky run in 1978, that removed her larger-than-life heroism to make her a down-to-earth martial artist fighting crime while running a flower shop. Though this was intended as a feminist storyline, by making her more of a self-made woman, it was massively hated by the second-wave feminist community for removing the first-wave feminist mythology of her being a larger-than-life female warrior from a land where men are unnecessary to female prosperity. Another option is Joss's way of making her flawed at the beginning, but learn a lesson by the end, while keeping her larger-than-life heroism. It's a valid narrative choice, but perhaps without perfect execution due to it being an early draft. Diana goes to the Temple of Athena to pray. Her friend Aethra follows her, and they discuss Steve, as well as Diana's conflict with her mother and Diana's desire to be seen as an adult. Aethra advises Diana to stop asking permission and to be assertive. Seems like a pass for the Bechdel test if we still care about such things. Even though Steve is one part of the subject, it's mostly about Diana's need to be respected as an adult. They also reference Steve as an item of sexual curiosity. Aethra seems especially into him, suggesting that Diana take a peek at his penis, and references other women who feel the same way. Diana has her mind on other things, but she knows what Aethra is talking about. The scene centers female sexual desire in a way not typically seen outside of media for older women, and I think that this has feminist value in a similar manner as the various jokes about women lusting after Thor in the MCU. It feels like it's targeted at women as much as to men. Diana sees a falcon and interprets that as a message from Athena, encouraging her to claim what she wants. So she interrupts the execution of Steve to challenge her mother to ritual combat to claim his life. Cue the first big action scene. Diana now in the Wonder Woman outfit. Steve as the helpless dude in distress on the sidelines. Hippolyta cautions Diana that she will lose her privilege in man's world and become vulnerable. Diana accepts this as a coming-of-age cost, so Hippolyta yields and allows her to do what she must. She embraces Diana and tells her to remember who she is. Diana leaves with Steve on his plane to join him on his mission, landing shortly at the refugee camp. Here we are introduced to the ancillary group characters, who I'm guessing are more or less a redux of the crew of Serenity, because they're referred to in the text as the crew. Ben, the dark-skinned, dry-witted diplomat, so basically Shepherd Book. Sully, the cold female doctor. Basically a female Simon? Maybe a proto-Claire from Dollhouse? And Griffin, the surfer dude mechanic. Maybe like Kayleigh's predecessor? Maybe a proto-Griff from Dollhouse? It's notable that Patty Jenkins's version went a similar route, with introducing a group upon transition to the second act, perhaps recognizing that it's hard for two people to carry the story, though the animated film did just that. In this draft, the crew barely does anything that warrants that many characters, so it seems to me that Joss should have gone the animated film's direction, and just focused on the main two. Unfortunately, in Steve's absence, the refugee camp has been guarded by a local rebel leader, Major Ghoshnak, described as a petty warlord, which makes me think of the petty crime lord, Badger, from Firefly, who decides not to leave and to instead take everything that the aid workers have. Steve disrespects Diana's ability to handle things and tells her to stay hidden while he handles things. It's a return to traditional gender roles. As it turns out, traditional gender roles are not effective, and only the dynamic of female dominance will work. The scene really reminds me of the scene in Firefly Episode 4 Shindig, when the captive crew are debating how to take out Badger and his men, who have taken over the ship. They decide on a plan to create a diversion, but can't come up with a reasonable diversion before they're distracted by River, the ostensibly vulnerable fugitive with a huge price on her head, wandering out of her hiding place. Badger questions her, and she unexpectedly displays enormous competence in talking her way out of trouble. After it's all done, the brutish Jane comments, hilariously, that she was the perfect diversion, and they totally blew it by not taking advantage of it. Joss appears to borrow the beats of the scene for this scene in Wonder Woman, and it doesn't work nearly as well as in Firefly. Ghoshnak and his men have guns on Steve and the crew. Steve tries to bribe Ghoshnak into letting them go in exchange for something special on the plane. I think that means the lasso of truth? Diana leaves the plane unexpectedly and messes up the already failing negotiation. Seeing her, Sully makes a gross comment about Steve offering Diana as a bribe. Like Steve is offering her as a sex slave. Ew. If Sully was supposed to be an evil but useful ally with some nicer facets, like Jane from Firefly, Spike from Buffy, or Bennett from Dollhouse, maybe it would work as a bit of edgy humor, but Joss describes her as brusque and efficient, but warm to the core. It doesn't work. It's just unpleasant. This feels like a mistake that would need to be fixed in a later draft. I certainly don't think that Joss would support the idea of Diana being offered as a sex slave. Firefly Episode 1 Serenity has Mal tear into Simon when he thinks that he's a sex trafficker.
She's not supposed to wake up for another week. The shock.
The shock of what? Waking up? Finding out she'd been sold to some border world baron? Or, I'm sorry, was this one for you? Is it true love?
It's just a sloppily written scene with an unfortunately sexist tone. Not understanding how guns are a threat, Diana very boldly opposes Ghoshnak and gets in a good line. Authority that cannot be questioned should look for a different name. Anti-authoritarianism is a classic feminist and Wonder Woman theme. However, it doesn't ring true to the characterization of Diana as this privileged princess who needs to learn respect. She shouldn't start out as Mistress Democracy, unless Themyscira is rewritten as some kind of anarchist commune. It's especially a problem in Joss's script, where he emphasizes her princess privilege character flaw so heavily. But it's worth noting that Jenkins's film makes the same flub of not recognizing Diana's socialization to an assumption of authority when she encounters wacky authoritarianism in Man's World.
What is a secretary?
Ooh, well, I do everything. I go where he tells me to go and I do what he tells me to do.
Oh, well, where I'm from, that's called slavery.
You are a princess! Ghoshnak is less than impressed and shoots her in the shoulder. She does a badass move of removing the bullet by hand without flinching, but then she collapses. Sully goes to work on her in a tense scene, while the crew marvels at Ghoshnak's audacity. Griffin says, "Who the hell shoots an unarmed, tasty-looking girl?" Ew! Wow. Rude much? You know, at this stage of development, it would literally make more sense if Steve's crew were composed of soulless demons from the Buffyverse than actual human beings. I get that Griffin is focusing on odd things that are apparent but aren't usually mentioned, but the execution is just gross. I much prefer Buffy saying,
"Well, I'm not exactly quaking in my stylish yet affordable boots, but there's definitely something unnatural going on here."
It's the same kind of joke, adding too much detail to reflect the character's own interests, but it's not dehumanizing a character into a sexual object, and that gives it wider appeal and more lasting power. And then Joss pulls one of his classic jokes. "Ha ha, I killed one of your favorite characters." Psych! As Sully comes out with a grave pronouncement that there's nothing more that she can do. She's fully healed. Nothing more she can do.
The man's psychotic.
It only took her 6 hours to heal, but she freaks out at being that vulnerable in man's world.
Time for some thrilling heroics.
Upon learning that Ghoshnak stole medicine meant for children, Diana leaps to action and violence ensues. However, she refuses to go for the kill out of disrespect. In an anti-gun theme, Diana states that guns are dishonorable and denounces Ghoshnak and his men as fake warriors, not worth killing. She insults them with mercy. An interesting take, to say the least. In addition to their pacifism in opposing America's involvement in World War I, first-wave feminism's tactics largely consisted of appeals to empathy with hunger strikes. One of the most notorious hunger strikers was Ethel Byrne, mother of Olive Byrne, and that feminist pacifism trickled down into Wonder Woman. Diana deflects bullets instead of firing them, and fights for women's rights through inspiring empathy, in an act of deliberate subversion of contemporary masculine aggression-based superheroes. The animated film almost entirely forgoes this, positioning her as a standard action hero and a very simple subversion of gender roles. Jenkins largely forgoes it in favor of emphasis on a masculine sword that turns out insufficient, while the power to defeat Ares is ultimately inside her all along. Joss goes for somewhere in the middle, doing the basic action hero gender role flip, while also having her show mercy and oppose gun violence. In isolating guns as an especially evil tool of war, in line with popular American liberal depictions, following the Columbine massacre, Joss misses an opportunity for nuance, where Diana could be criticized for opposing the manner in which squishy humans defend themselves, when she herself is privileged as a superhuman who can deflect bullets. Hancock makes a point about it, and it would fit into Joss's theme about Diana's privilege. But he instead opts for a straightforward anti-gun theme as part of the greater anti-war theme. During the fight scene, there is a distinct theme of Diana being kinky. Her defeat of Ghoshnak and his men emphasizes her dominance, being more powerful than her opponents and beating them into submission. In particular, Diana steps on someone's neck, which was to be shot in an extreme low angle to frame her in dominance. Some feminists call this an example of Joss sexualizing the character to appeal to his possible foot fetish. However, this kind of shot was also featured in the animated film, so I'm again hesitant to ascribe it to such. It also bears some similarity to the depiction of her stepping on Batman's head in Greg Rucka's The Hikatea. The dominance theme is unfortunately underdeveloped. It's not present elsewhere in the script, but it shows promise as a trait that could bring interest to the character, in its homage to Marston's original kinky take on her, and is one of the many signs that the script just isn't a final draft. Ghoshnak tries to shoot her again, but she's ready for him and deflects his shots with her bracelets. She is afraid, but grows into her strength, dismissively knocking the bullets away. As he backs away, now the one who's afraid. She smashes his gun to pieces and knocks him out, asserting her dominance over the camp and making his men submit. It's an overt feminist narrative, paying homage to Marston's original themes of female domination and pacifism. The scene bears some similarity to the No Man's Land scene in Jenkins's version. The protagonists come across a German-occupied Belgian town where the civilians are being exploited, and the English forces have basically given up, unable to do anything more than keep the Germans from advancing. Diana looks at the suffering people and charges in, using her shield to withstand the German assault in a moment that symbolizes female strength against male aggression. In many cases, women were moved to tears when they saw it, even if they couldn't understand the subtext. bravery galvanizes the men, who provide her assistance, and they defeat the Germans together and liberate the town in a big action scene. Joss was planning to do something similar, with Diana defeating Goshnak and his men in a big badass action scene that would have shown her empowerment as she overcomes obstacles, and there would have been a similar profound message in the subtext. Women against guns and corrupt authority instead of sexism, though the theme of fighting sexism shows up later in the text. It's a different route for a Wonder Woman empowerment scene, but I think it's legitimate. If it were more polished, could have been an exciting scene, in a similar way as Jenkins's scene. However, Jenkins's version would likely be superior as a feminist message, because it's specifically about a feminist subject, instead of merely being broader progressivism. As for being able to move audiences to tears, well, Joss has demonstrated this ability in the past with Buffy's empowerment, so I see no reason why a more polished version of the scene couldn't be equally as successful. I hope my summary of the screenplay is interesting enough to listen to. Reading it is a chore, but maybe the process of translating it to a video review will smooth it out, like the Twilight book to the graphic novel. For all I want to defend it from unreasonably aggressive criticism, I want to emphasize that this isn't a good plot. This is not a fun read. The screenplay is bad. I'm not even halfway through my summary, and I'm already sick of this film. For both the length and my own personal sanity, I'm going to have to stop here for now. I hope you'll join me in part 2 as I discuss unsubtle phallic symbols, the big bondage scene, and Diana fighting sex traffickers, evil Nightcrawler, Lila from Angel, and Mecha King Ghidorah. I'm exaggerating that less than you think.